What is up, everybody? It's your boy Sil, and we are going to be doing a tier list. This one is going to be the DPS tier list. After playing all of the available classes as far as meta classes in PvE, I wanted to just quickly put out these tier lists so that way we can see where all the classes fall in relationship to each other. I know that while I was going over each individual class, I did cover how they relate to each other in the meta kind of loosely. So for this one, we are going to be doing DPS. Since I saved Elementalist for last, we will be doing all the Elementalist ones first. For DPS, I think that, of course, Weaver falls in the lowest possible category. That is a absolute garbage spec. It is probably the worst spec in the entire game. So just to get that one out of the way, it is really bad. Weaver, not good. Tempest is actually really good with the Power Fresh Air Tempest. It does have some crossplay in Boon DPS. I would say A tier. It does lack CC, that's why it would go there. Power Catalyst is kind of new on the block. It is pretty good. I do feel it is better in its Boon DPS role, so I'm going to put that one in B tier. Moving on to the Warrior, I would say that Berserker is probably a B tier DPS, maybe a C tier DPS. Just because of the way Berserker mode functions, you really do need your target to be standing still if you want your Condi DPS to work, or you need not a lot of phases on the boss encounter if you want your power DPS to work. So either a B or a C tier for Berserker. Spellbreaker, I would say Spellbreaker is between A and S tier. It has a lot of self boons. It is very available. I would say it's probably closer to S tier than A tier just because it does have a lot of CC. Has a lot of survivability, does really good damage. It's got an easy rotation. It does have opportunities for group support if you dropped Winds of Disenchantment for the banner. So I would say Spellbreaker is probably an S tier DPS build. It is full melee, so that does kind of suck, but it's all right. Bladesworn, I would put Bladesworn in C tier. Bladesworn just kind of sucks because there's really no support and it is very buggy and janky. It does a lot of damage, so maybe a B tier. I would say it's worse than Berserker mode is, though, just because at least with Berserker you do have the opportunity for Wild Blow or Headbutt, and this guy doesn't have any kind of CC, and it relies on the ammo recharge elite skill, so you don't even really have an opportunity to use your banner if you wanted to. So I would say probably C tier, maybe D tier for Bladesworn. Now for the Mesmer specs, Chronomancer is A tier. I would say DPS Chrono is kind of really outshined by its Virtuoso counterparts. I would obviously put Virtuoso in S tier. Virtuoso, the Condivert, is the best build in the game. It is the best class in the game. Power Virtuoso is also really strong, even though it is really heavily reliant on melee if you do run the spear build. If you still run Greatsword on Power Vert, it does have that full range capability, which is nice. But the Condivert option is by far the best build in the game. I don't think anybody argues it. Ton of CC, super easy to play, a lot of survivability built in Distort, and you have full range. So what's there not to love? Mirage, I would say Mirage is probably C or D tier. It's just kind of a broken class right now. It has no real purpose or reason. It could live here with Bladesworn. Maybe both of these deserve to be D tier, but it is not a good class. Mirage is a shadow of its former self, and all of what the Mirage used to do, it got taken over by the Chronomancer and the Virtuoso. So there's really no point for that class to exist anymore. So obviously it's down here in the garbage with everybody else. Moving on, we have the Thief. I would say Daredevil is probably an A tier build. It has a lot of CC. It's really easy to play. Both the Condi and Power Daredevil is a lot of fun to play. I personally like bringing out the Condi Daredevil build just to have tons of evade frames. The Deadeye is probably a C tier build. I would say that it is really, really strong. It is one of the higher DPS builds, but it is very complicated to play. It does rely on certain aspects like stealth to do its damage. I did try playing this build. I did not enjoy playing this build at all. It might be equivalent to like a B tier with like where the catalyst is, the power catalyst. I would almost prefer a power catalyst over a power Deadeye on my group if they were both equally skilled. I just feel that the Elementalist might have a little bit more support to bring to the table than the Deadeye does. Spectre, I would say Spectre is probably B tier. I think all of the Thief builds are kind of middle of the road. I think Spectre does have a lot of cool stuff that it can bring to the table along with its Shroud that it brings. Like, it does have some boon DPS options that are pretty fun to play, even though that they aren't really sought after in comparison to the other. Once we get into the boon DPS tier list, you'll see Spectre kind of lower on the list, I feel. But I do feel like Spectre as a class is definitely better than Deadeye, and it's probably worse than Daredevil. Moving on to Guardian. I really like Dragon Hunter. I would say it's A tier. It is very strong, really easy to play. It's a good build. It's a good regular old power DPS build, and it's good in the open world. I would say Firebrand, the Condi Firebrand is still really good. It has gotten more complex. It's probably an A tier build as well, just because it is Firebrand. You do get your tomes. It's better as a healer though. Like, it is just that specialization I feel shines as a healer. I do still think that it is better than a lot of classes. Like, I think the Condi DPS Firebrand is better than everything in the tiers below it, for sure. And the Willbender, I do think that the power in Condi Willbender is S tier. It brings a lot of CC. I believe that it has full range options, at least for the Condi version. It has some range available to it. I definitely don't think it's as good as Virtuoso. I think Virtuoso is the best build in the game, but it's at least as good as like a Spellbreaker. Moving on to Druid, I would say Condi Druid as a DPS is probably C tier. It's really not that good. It's really, really high APM. It relies on full melee, and it just, once again, this is another class that's it's just better as a healer. Soul Beast is an S tier build. It has both Condi, power, and hybrid options available to it. It has some CC built in, even though it's not really that great. And it is your go-to burst power class. It's great in fractals. It's great in raids. I think Soul Beast is a good build. The Power Untamed is another build that's super high APM. It does bring a lot to the table, and it's super survivable. I'd say it's probably A tier, maybe B tier, somewhere between these two tiers. It's pretty good. It's just not as good as Soul Beast. It's definitely better than Druid. It's more of an open world kind of friendly class, just because of all of the available sustain and stuff you get from it. It's in a kind of a weird place. Untamed was one of those classes that didn't really launch with a lot of love when it came out with End of Dragons. So it's still kind of finding its place in the meta. I don't think it's played like hardly at all though. Moving on to Rev, I would say Herald is definitely either C or D tier in terms of DPS. It's better than these two for sure. I would say it's probably it's in C tier. It's not a very good class. It's good for the heal and the boon DPS. It's not meant for pure DPS. Renegade, the Power Renegade, or the Condi Renegade rather, is super good. I would say it's at least A tier, almost between A and S. It's got pretty much everything you'd want. It's really easy to play these days. Super strong class. Same thing with the Vindicator. Vindicator is super easy power DPS class to play. Kind of gives you everything you'd want. It has option for staff, so you could just blow a bunch of CC bars. Hollowsmith was one that was like super high APM. It's kind of almost like in the Weaver category. I'll put it in D tier. It only brings DPS to the table, and it's super hard to play. So people that are really, really good at it, this is like S tier build, but anybody else, it's going to be C or D tier. It's not as bad as Mirage is, and it's not as bad as Bladesworn is. Maybe it's C tier. I would say it's C tier. It's probably about on par with the Deadeye, where it is a fully functioning build. It's just not as easy to play, and it doesn't quite have the utility that the other classes have. Scrapper is probably in B or A tier. I would say it's probably an A tier build. It does bring a lot of utility to the table, even full DPS. It brings a lot of self-sustain. I would say it's definitely an A tier build. The Mechanist, now the Mechanist is the noob class, right? I would say it's A tier. The Condi Mech is really strong. It's super easy to play. Maybe it's B tier. I would say it's probably B tier. It can put its DPS out there very easily. It's just it lacks some utility, and that's the main hang up. Now with Reaper, I would say Reaper is A tier. Obviously Power Reaper is the go-to. It does have a Condi version too that's pretty easy to play. Both of them are easy to play. You get a second health bar, you have built-in CC, you have Flesh Golem if you want it. Super easy, straightforward build. Scourge S tier build. I would say that it is probably the worst of the S tier builds for DPS, just because it has been nerfed so heavily. It does have free Condi cleanses, it has free barrier, it has free CC, it can bring group support through its utilities. Its utility skills are more or less wide open. It provides us a lot of boons to your group, even though that it is full DPS. So I would still say Scourge is S tier, even though its DPS is probably on the lower end out of all of these benchmarks. Just the kit itself that's built into Scourge makes it so strong. Harbinger is kind of the same place. I would say probably A tier, maybe B tier. Harbinger's main problem is that it plays the same regardless of how you play it. So it has boon DPS builds and it has DPS builds for power and Condi, and it literally just plays exactly the same regardless of which role you play it as. Some people really enjoy that. I just think it's very boring. It's a very narrow class. It does have some built-in CC. It does have little things. It's not very survivable. Maybe it is B tier. I would say, yeah, I'm gonna put it in B tier. I know the 3 Harbinger mains are not gonna like it, but I think it's a good class. It's definitely kind of like Mechanist, where it does have its spot and it is valid. It's just, if you were gonna have a Harbinger on your team versus like a Willbender or a Vert, you'd probably be disappointed, you know? And that is pretty much it for the DPS tier list. So getting started with the Quickness Berserker. I would say the Quickness Berserker is probably like a B tier quickness provider. It's just kind of inconsistent, we'll say. Moving on, the Chronomancer. The Chrono can do everything. It can do quickness and alacrity. It's A tier, has a lot of CC, has a lot of support that it brings to the table. It's overall good build. The Quickness Deadeye. Quickness Deadeye is C tier. It's overly complicated. It does bring a lot of damage to the table, but that's about it. It's okay. The Quickness Firebrand, the Quickness Condi Firebrand, I believe is A tier. It is a Guardian class, so you just have a ton of utility regardless, and you have all of your tomes for everything. So it's super easy to fill whatever you need to do. The Herald is S tier. The Quickness Herald is arguably the best quickness DPS provider in the game. That's why you see it everywhere. It's just so good. It's super easy to play. Alacrity Mirage is broken, doesn't exist anymore. The Alacrity Renegade, I would say, is probably B tier. I still like playing it, but it is a shadow of its former self. I don't think that it's really all that good anymore. The Alacrity Scourge is probably either A or S tier. It brings everything you love about Scourge with Condi cleanses and everything, and DPS just with boons. That's it. It's the class itself is super good. It's just the only difference is it's just not a healer. I'm gonna leave it in S tier. The Quickness Scrapper, definitely A tier build minimum. It is arguably an S tier build, but it is basically a power scrapper, except it provides a ton of boons, has a ton of CC. It's super easy to play. I personally love it. It's awesome. And yeah, the Alacrity Tempest. Alacrity Tempest is actually pretty good. I would say it's A tier. The Power Alacrity Tempest, that is super strong. It's just the main hang up is that it doesn't really provide any CC. That's the main problem with the Elementalist as a whole in general. Scrapper with Hammer, you provide a ton of CC. Chrono and Guardian probably have the highest amount of CC the utilities in the entire game, so it's hard to compete in this row. I'm going to drop it down. It is good. It's just that you're relying on your heal chrono or your quickness firebrand to actually do all of the CC if you are rocking a boon support that is an elementalist. It just sucks, but that's where it is. I would say it's B tier. It's definitely on par with say a berserker or at least the Condi renegade. Moving on, you have the Alacrity Bladesworn, garbage tier, garbage build. Bladesworn is broken, do not play it. Next you have the quickness harbinger. I would say it is probably C. No, it's B tier. It's got some CC. It's pretty easy to play. Now the power and Condi Alacrity mech builds I actually liked. I thought that they were pretty good. They aren't necessarily the best, but I would not hate seeing an Alacrity mech as my boon support. It provided Alacrity and it did decent damage, and it's just okay. It's not the best at anything, but it's pretty good, you know? The Alacrity Spectre is kind of in a weird spot. Definitely not the best, definitely not the worst, and that's kind of where that falls. The Alacrity Willbender, I would say, is probably B tier. It's a Guardian spec, so it's hard to go wrong with it. You just end up having to play super hard to get your Alacrity and to maintain your Alacrity, and that's really the main problem with the Alacrity Willbender. We have the Quickness Untamed. I would say that the Quickness Untamed is kind of in the same boat as these guys, where you have to kind of play kind of hard to get your boons out there, but it's not bad. It's not a bad build. It's just not the greatest. And then the Quickness Catalyst. I was actually surprised by Quickness Catalyst. It was actually a lot of fun, and it did provide a lot of boons. The main issue is it does not provide that much CC. I would say probably swapping these two, they're probably on par with each other. If you had basically like 2 heal temps and 2 heal catalysts, your group is going to need a ton of spell breakers or something to be able to pass CC checks, but it is doable. I think that they're A tier builds. We could leave it like that. I'm pretty happy with this as the boon support tier list. Moving on to the heal builds, we have Chronomancer. Obviously, that is S tier. It can do quick, alac, tons of CC. Everything's great. Everybody loves heal chronos. They exist. They're super easy to play. Firebrand, still S tier, still one of the best healers in the game. And once again, ton of CC, tons of utility. It's a Guardian. Everybody loves them. The Scourge is S tier still, even after the transfusion nerfs. All you got to do is play 1% better. Maybe it's A tier if you really want to make that argument, but I'll put it in A tier. All right, it's not as good as it was. Everybody has this discarded vision that it sucks now or something, but it's still super good. You're still gonna see it busted out when people are trying to hard carry. You have the Druid. Druid is S tier. Tons of healing, tons of boons, tons of CC. The only difference is you need 2 functioning brain cells to play it instead of just 1. The Herald is probably A tier. It's not quite as good as this row, I would say, but it is probably better than the Scourges. So this is Troll. This is probably a B tier. This, I would say probably B tier, maybe A. It's A tier. This is definitely B tier. I think that this boon production is a lot easier than the Tempest one is. It's just that the Tempest, I feel, does more. I don't know. It's not that bad. This A tier. Spectre, probably C tier. Maybe no. It's better than Renegade. This D tier, and this I would say B. Yeah. Heal Willbender's all right. All right. Yeah. And that's the heal tier list. I feel like that's pretty accurate. Not a lot of explanation, but yeah. I'm going to just use this video just to make a quick little channel announcement. I did go live, and despite that live stream actually netting me in negative subscriber territory, I just wanted to put out there that anybody who's watching this, I will be going live starting this Saturday, and I'm going to try to continue every Saturday from about 6 a.m. to 8:30 PST. This is kind of dipping my toes into live streaming. I will be playing games. Sometimes it'll be Guild Wars 2, sometimes it'll be other games. I do right now have Lies of P on the docket. And if you wanted to support this channel, you could always join under a membership or just stop into the live streams and give a shout out in chat. Your viewership is always more than enough. But with that, I wanted to thank you all for watching this video on the Guild Wars 2 tier list. Thanks so much. A special thanks to my subscribers and a special thanks to my very first member, Mr. Gary the Viking. So with that, I will be continuing with Guild Wars 2 content. I'll be continuing with the videos. I'm just incorporating some live streams into the mix. So if you want to stop by and interact with me, feel free to swing by the live streams on Saturday morning. You can get your coffee ready or get your beer ready for the evening if you are on the EU side, and join me while I play through some of these games that you might not be interested in buying, or you might be interested in buying after seeing me play them. So yeah. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.